most complicated of the problems and absolutely the one that I think is the most interesting. And when you look at the words, what should make it most interesting to you is in 1789, the United States was a deadbeat, broke nation with worthless paper money. We had no credit rating. We were a nation that our own citizens did not trust the monetary system. Today, we have a nation that is the most powerful nation on earth, and we cannot figure out our own finances. We can't pay our own bills. The point of the lesson today should be, if the United States of America wants to fix its money problem, it's much more of a responsibility issue than a we can't do it issue. Ladies and gentlemen, here we go. I cannot emphasize enough, there is a big problem. And when I say there's a big problem, we're going to look at, there's actually several parts. Money is going to be given to Hamilton. This is his job. He is the treasurer. And what we want to emphasize, and this again, there's no doubt, Hamilton, every single person in this room, if you are doing it correctly, you either love him or hate him. If you love him, you are a Federalist. If you hate him, you are an anti-Federalist. When we start talking, if you think Jefferson sounds more rational and practical, you would support Jefferson's view. That would be the Democratic Republicans or anti-Federalists. Here we go. Please remember, I also told you that Hamilton is a genius. He is exceedingly smart. Folks, sometimes being smart is not simply understanding the complicated. It is understanding how to manipulate people. Folks, when we look at Hamilton's plans, 1, 2, 3, 4, there will be 4 of them. Please notice the order. Alexander Hamilton was smart enough to realize that some of these plans are going to be very controversial. They are going to upset people. Whenever you deal with people's money, look at today. Taxes. Do we want to cut programs? People get all freaked out, right? Think about the stupidity of our country. We complain about the debt, but we don't want to cut any programs. We complain about the debt, but we don't want to raise taxes. Do you see the basic problem? Whenever you deal with money, people are always going to be very, take it from somebody else. That is going to be, that's the basic thing to know for the rest of the life. Rich people want to take it from the poor people. Ladies and gentlemen, number 1, and this is going to be by far and away the quickest and simplest. The Tariff of 1789. The Tariff of 1789, and again, I sometimes have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, the Tariff of 1789 is a very simple law. A tariff, you'll need to put this in your head for the rest of the year, is a tax on imports. So ladies and gentlemen, as products come into America, we are going to tax foreign goods. Think how ironic this is. This is kind of like the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act. So when goods come into America, we are going to tax them. This is a tax. What is one thing that Hamilton did to try to create less problem? Instead of taxing American goods, American products, American businesses, we are going to tax foreigners. When you look at the Tariff of 1789, what is the purpose? The government had no money. Ladies and gentlemen, the government had no money. How do we pay the soldiers? How do we buy staples? How do we literally run the government from day to day to day? The Tariff of 1789 is a 5% tariff on every single product that enters the country. This is like our sales tax, correct? And if you're trying to, folks, this is not going to fix America's problems in 1789. This was going to generate enough money that the government could pay its basic expenses. So every single day when the government does various things, they buy food because the president needs to eat, they need money to do those things. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get this out of the way right now. I do the same exact one every year, and if you want to know why, because in my old early U.S. history book, this was the example they used. Please notice, we have a product. The little things there are hats. One hat will be made in England, one hat will be made in the United States. Folks, in an economic sense, whether you're in Mr. Handel's class or when you guys go to college for some of you, oftentimes in business they use imaginary products that they call widgets. What you need to understand, folks, is the hat could be any product. It doesn't matter. If you want, you can simply put in monkey wrenches, or you could put in a pair of pants. What we are trying to show you is how a tariff works. Everybody clear? First thing, ladies and gentlemen, the price is simply what you pay when you buy the product. Without any tax, the circle would represent what a normal, rational person should do, because at this time in history, a person makes $3 a week. 50 cents is a lot of money. Tariffs are only taxes on imports. The American product cannot be taxed. Remember, we said 5%, so it would literally be 5 cents. The British product is still cheaper. Ladies and gentlemen, what is the key item to understand a tariff? Every time somebody buys the product, we collect the tax, and that money goes to the government. A revenue tariff raises money for the government. Some of you are like, Mr. Cleveland, this is pretty easy. The reason I'm doing this is because eventually there will be a second type of tariff, which is a little bit more complicated. This is a revenue tariff. The one thing that people get confused about, see this? The American product does not get taxed. Tariffs only tax foreign imported goods. Everybody okay? See the smiley face? Nobody objected to the tariff 79. Nobody fought about it. It doesn't really offend anybody. Remember how we are beginning to talk about north, south, federal, anti? This was relatively harmless. There was nobody jumping up and down and saying, that's unfair, that's unethical. Here comes number 2. The second one, ladies and gentlemen, is called the Report on Public Credit. And if you are trying to sort of think or put yourself into perspective, this would be in 1790. So please notice, Hamilton is going to do this relatively quickly. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander Hamilton is going to do what everybody else said what they were afraid of. Folks, this is the part that most high school kids, in fact, maybe Mr. Cleveland, sometimes in order to do something right, you have to do some dirty work. You have to kind of get, you have to get, gather information. You have to find things out. Report on Public Credit, Alexander Hamilton went and he literally calculated how much money do we owe? How bad is it? What is the total amount of money we have borrowed? I want to remind you, this is in the year 1790. Ladies and gentlemen, in the year 1790, $1 million is like make-believe money. It is so... There are not millionaires in 1790. There's people who make $1,000 and you're set for the year. We owed $51 million, and I'm not done yet. Of the $51 million, Alexander Hamilton then indicates that $11 million was owed to foreign countries. France, Spain, Portugal, whoever. The $40 million is what is called domestic debt. During the war, American citizens borrowed money to government. Maybe we borrowed money from states. So when you look at the $51 million, the United States of America was $51 million, $11 million to foreign countries, and $40 million to our own citizens. Is everybody okay? Hamilton's not done. I mean, right now, at 1790, this is enough to make most people go, oh yeah, holy crap. Oh, that's a big number. Next, Alexander Hamilton then goes on to show that the states owe an additional $20 million. So the United States of America owes $51 million. The 13 states owe another $20 million. If you add that together, in 1790, the United States of America, as our country is beginning, as we are trying to flourish, we were negative $71 million. Now, as I say that, the vast majority of intelligent, respected people said the only solution is bankruptcy. Basically argue that that money was borrowed by the Congress, the Second Congress. That money was by the Articles. We should simply say, dissolve it and start at zero. The United States of America should literally void our old responsibility. And why would people say that? Because it's too complicated. Most people said, how on earth can we ever pay back that much money? The United States of America will not make $71 million in 10 years. It's the only practical decision people thought. Hamilton disagreed. And what Hamilton is going to do is he's going to come up with a three-step approach. Folks, this is where some of you distinguish yourself from your classmates. Do you know what? Any one of you can do that. Any one of you. What Hamilton did after he did that. Folks, this is to scare the crap out of people. This is reality. What Hamilton did next is this is how you fix it. 1, 2. Number 1. Literally. Alexander Hamilton said it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we get there. In fact, Hamilton even said if we have to borrow more money, you pay the foreigners first. We have to pay them. Do you know why? Because they are not committed to America. They don't care about America. They are not invested in this. For the rest of these folks, do you see the 40 million? Those are Americans. They are stuck here. Do you think France or Spain is ever going to trust us or help us again if they don't get their money back? So number 1 is basic. You pay them. Don't matter how, you pay them. Number 2. And please understand, this is where it gets a little bit more when people say that he was bright. He proposes what is called assumption. To assume. Now, as I say that, a lot of you are like, okay, what are you going to assume? What are we assumting? As Alexander Hamilton shows the entire nation that, Alexander Hamilton's second proposal, other than pay the foreigners, is the United States of America should take responsibility. The United States of America must guarantee that this is paid, and we should assume. Gentlemen, Hamilton is literally arguing that we should take the money that has been borrowed by the states. The federal government should argue that it was all part of the revolution. The federal government should take responsibility, and the United States of America should pay it. And as I say that, when I look around the room, I see people going, okay, I understand we want the 71 million, but I think the issue, why? Why would you want to make the debt bigger? Hamilton is bright. And do you know what I've noticed about bright people over the years? They're manipulative. They often say things not because it's what they believe, but because they know how people react. Ladies and gentlemen, this is what Hamilton, it's the right thing to do. This money was borrowed for the war, correct? America must do this for the good of the people. Oh, holy cow. Get out the violin, right? Folks, the second argument is simply responsibility. It must be paid. Hamilton is going to argue that the federal government is more capable of paying it back, and it would be more organized. So the responsibility is going to be much more of why don't we have the federal government do this? You know, instead of in your states trying to make payments, the federal government make payments, why don't we organize this as one project? Now look at what these guys said. Hamilton is a Federalist. He supports what? Forced loyalty. If you are an anti-Federalist, where is your loyalty? Many of those anti-Federalists borrowed money to their state, right? Hamilton is going to take the money borrowed to states by anti-Federalists, and it's going to be assumed to the federal government. Most people who borrow money eventually want it back. Who do you now need to support? Who now owes them the money? And if the federal government fails, they will never get the money back. Ladies and gentlemen, many anti-Federalists were outspoken that the government was wrong. They don't like the Constitution. Well, now, if you are openly encouraging people to go against the United States government and the government fails, you will lose your money. Ladies and gentlemen, see the little squiggly line? The one thing I think people forget as I talk, sometimes you don't say everything out loud. Right? This is what Hamilton would openly tell people. The war effort, responsibility, you know, the government will take care of our problems. These are the things that are real. These are true, but you don't necessarily tell people because it'll make them mad. Folks, what is it? It says states aren't equal. Do you know the assumption that everybody always makes is the $20 million was that every state owed the same amount? If the federal government assumes the money, the United States owes it, and all states will have to pay an equal share. It'll be divided by what number?
13.
13. Was the war fought equally in every state?
No.
And remember, some states also never went to paper money. They used, so they were more capable of paying it back. Some states also have that crappy product that we smoke. Anyone want to take a wild guess which part of the country tended to have more death? The North, because there was more. Also the North, you know, their trade was being cut off during the war. Remember when I told you that you needed to understand Hamilton versus Jefferson? What does Hamilton believe the future of our country is? Industry. Ladies and gentlemen, how is the North going to industrialize if they have an additional debt burden that they have to pay first? Factories are expensive. I didn't say Hamilton's a nice, noble man all the time. Ulterior motives. That's assumption. Ladies and gentlemen, you know what Alexander Hamilton has done up to this point? He's played a shell game. He simply took the ball, he put it on the table, put a cup, he rearranged it, but have we changed the problem? Whether you do this or this, the United States owes $71 million. No. It's an illusion. Here's the solution. Folks, this is the part that is high-end, top of the line, holy crap, brilliant. When you look at the $71 million problem, where was the problem? Where was the issue that Americans were absolutely didn't know what to do? Nobody wanted the crappy money. The problem was, even if the government tries to pay something, if you got it was like, I don't want it, I don't want it. Don't give me that crap. Millions of dollars in paper crap, and what is the argument? So when I say declare bankruptcy, why don't we, the argument was simply announce the paper is worthless. But that would mean that money that the United States government gave you, we lied. The problem was during the war, we did what with the money? We had to fight a war, but when you print too much money, economically, that is called inflation. There's the problem. So how do we get rid of the inflation? Ladies and gentlemen, this is what Alexander Hamilton proposes. Alexander Hamilton proposes that every single citizen will be able to take their paper, and they will be able to take it to the United States government, and they will hand over their paper, and they will get a bond. For those of you who do not understand the difference, folks, paper money is what is called a liquid security. A liquid security means you can use it right now. You can use it instantly. It is good today. Okay? A bond is a security that has a date. And if you try to use the bond before the date, you pay a penalty. See the 30? Alexander Hamilton proposes that the bonds will be spread out over 30 years. So ladies and gentlemen, as people come in to give their paper money, you will then be awarded bonds. Now remember, what is the biggest problem? We don't have $71 million. What is Hamilton proposing? We would spread the money out over 30 years. We don't need $71 million at one time. Eventually, when your bond matures, all of our old paper will be gone. People will have all these bonds. When you want to cash in your bond, you will get brand new paper money, which is called a security, backed by gold. Ladies and gentlemen, these are called certificates. Alexander Hamilton is literally throwing out the old money, replacing it with brand new money being backed on gold. However, in order to do that, he is allowing people to take paper, change it for a bond. What is the disadvantage? You have to wait for your bond to mature. Once it matures, you cash it. But what is the key item? You get your original money. Folks, after Hamilton proposes this, people disagree. Hamilton believes in face value. Folks, what face value means is if you had $500, you would get $500 in bonds. Many people believed that why don't we just do this with market value? So right now, if a $20 bill was worth $2, why don't we give people the $2 in the money? That's the whole thing. Hamilton believes that the government must support what people were promised. Hamilton is going to argue that this is sort of integrity of the government. There's another problem. Ladies and gentlemen, as this plan is being debated, a group of men went around the country. They went around the country and they would knock on your door and they would say, "Hi, good sir. I'm just traveling through the area and I am appalled at what our government has done, and I am trying to help poor farmers and veterans of our war, and I would like to buy up your worthless paper crap. You know what I'm going to do? I will pay you a dime of silver for every dollar of paper. So ladies and gentlemen, when we look at this, the problem is much of that paper money had been given out over 10 years ago. During that time, the paper had become worthless, especially as the rumors of this began to travel across the newspapers. Genius or unscrupulous men began to buy up the paper for pennies on the dollar. These men now began to have stockpiles of paper money. They are called speculators. Does Jefferson like or dislike them? Jefferson despises them as being men who are preying on the innocent, the hardworking, the average American. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamilton believes they should be rewarded. And if you are too damn dumb to give away your money, whose fault is that? And they didn't get it from, they got a dime. They were happy with a dime. They're stupid, dumb, ignorant people. And think of it from Hamilton's point of view. If this plan passes, this group of people is going to have big pockets of money. And people with big pockets of money always want to do what? What? Make more. They will build bigger plantations. They will start businesses. They will start companies. And they will help America grow. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander Hamilton did not dread this because these people will be the stimulators of the future. The people who got the dime, let's be honest, they got exactly what they thought the money was worth. If I have not said so, Jefferson and his friends hate this. So if you're looking at the faces, remember this? We'll put a neutral face. I said they hate it, but they're at least willing. Does this inherently go against the South? No. This favors what kind of people? Rich people, right? So rich people in the South could do that too, right? Rich people who don't like it. If you were the dumb person who gave away your paper money, that's not fair. In fact, Thomas Jefferson actually proposed we should do this and give the money back to the original owner. You know how complicated that would be? Ladies and gentlemen, what is the problem for Jefferson? Jefferson believes that assumption favored the North because many northern states were the ones in debt. And Jefferson believed that redemption was very kind of greedy to the poor. However, in order to do this, there's a deal. Jefferson's cronies agree to vote yes. They will not block this. They will not stop this. The report on public credit passes. In exchange, the capital of the United States is moved to Washington, D.C. Ladies and gentlemen, the original capital was going to be in New York City. As part of the report on manufacturing, in order for Alexander Hamilton to create his financial plan, in order to begin to get America on a financial stability, he agrees to do this, so please understand. Part of the report on public credit is the capital will move to Washington, D.C., or what will become. Why on earth would Jefferson and his friends like that? Because Washington, D.C. is technically in what state? D.C. is inside of Maryland, which is which means what? Ladies and gentlemen, pretty soon, if you're a southern state, that means you are a state that allows slavery. The South believed having the capital in a slave state would give advantage to Southern, and they agreed to that. Number 3. Report number 3 is a report on a national bank. Report on a national bank, 1791. Does everybody see the first word? Report. Once again, what does Hamilton do? And again, please understand, this is a part of this, right? Okay? So this is the third one. 1, 2, 3. Ladies and gentlemen, Alexander Hamilton's report does what? He basically gives examples of every single time the Congress deals with money. Alexander Hamilton basically creates this huge report, and it shows, remember, they have to pay for the post office, they pay for the army, they have to create taxes, they have to print money. Hamilton basically shows that our Congress constantly deals with money. Does everybody understand that? And what is Hamilton's number one argument? Up until this time, we are using state banks. Literally, we take the money of the government and we spread it across America. We put some in the Bank of New York, and some in the Bank of Pennsylvania, and some in the Bank of Georgia, and the money's all over the place. And Hamilton says this is a bad plan. And specifically what Hamilton is going to argue is we want a better plan. Alexander Hamilton proposes that there should be one nationalized bank. There should be one bank where the government puts all of its money. Think of it in terms of, most of you, if you open your wallet and you see $1, you just sort of spend it. It's only $1. However, if you save up that $1 every day and you all of a sudden have $300 in your wallet, it's the same amount of money, but you look at it different. So what is his argument? Number one, going to make Congress job easy. Folks, what did I tell you? The report in the National Bank shows dozens, hundreds of places where the Congress is constantly. And folks, what was the problem? We had money spread out all over the place. It was hard to follow. It was disorganized. Hamilton's number one argument is it would make the government's job easier. We want to be helpful. Number two, we want to make the money safer. Now, as I say that, can anyone take a guess? What does that mean? Ladies and gentlemen, banks borrow money. Do you guys understand? Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize about 10 years ago, banks, in fact, that's still why we're kind of in that recession. Do you guys all understand the recession that we're just getting out of? Well, I see. Yes, what? What did our banks do? Ladies and gentlemen, what happened in the 90s was exactly the same that would happen in the 20s, was exactly the same that would happen in the 1830s, but with a different product. Ladies and gentlemen, you were a young college graduate. You had your first job and you had $70,000 in college debt. Banks were finding a house in a nice neighborhood that was going up by 20% a year. You come to them as a smart college graduate and you would buy your first home, a $250,000 house. And they would make you pay nothing down. Okay? And what they would give you a special deal. No interest for a year. The bank took out a $250,000. And why would they do such a crazy thing? Griffin would hold it for a year. He would put it for sale the following year, and the stupid house would sell for $275,000. Griffin just made $25,000 for living in a beautiful house for a year. It was easy money. The bank made money. Griffin made money. So clearly, Griffin's like, that was fun. What does he do next time? Buys a $400,000 house. Lives in it for a year. Ladies and gentlemen, this kept going on for 7, 8 years. Eventually, what happened? For whatever reason, all of a sudden, people stopped buying the houses. Griffin's not an idiot. Because originally, what did the banks do? Oh, no, okay, there was a little bit of a bubble, so they got Griffin to refinance it, right? So his $500,000 house, he now has mortgage for $1 million. And here's the point. I will guarantee, somewhere in your guys' life, probably 5 of you will wreck your entire life because you don't pay attention today. Griffin isn't stupid. He took out that loan. And a lot of you are like, I'm not stupid, I'm not going to do that. Yeah, that's the point. Do you know eventually what happens when no one buys Griffin's house? Griffin walks into the bank and says, here, my house is mortgaged for $1.8 million, but I'm now being told it's worth $400,000. Here, you can have the house back. Griffin never paid a dime. The bank told its investors, you people who put money in the bank, that it was worth $1.8 million. So the bank is now stuck with a $1.8 million loss, correct? And what do? The only way to get money back is to basically raise rates or change things for all the people who do pay the mortgage.